Hello to all SalesShakers out there. Thank you so much for joining us, myself and Rajiv. I am so excited today. I think I say this about all our guests, but it is true. We tend to pick the best of the best, and Rajiv is no exception. Rajiv, the Raj Nation, the startup hype man. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you at home or on your mobile, wherever you are, for joining us and for listening into this conversation. Let me just get straight to what brings us here today. Tell me, Rajiv, okay, how would you explain what you do to somebody from another planet?
Yeah, so I think that's such a cool question. Hopefully the person from the other planet does speak English now. So assuming there's no language barrier, I think I would simply say, I help businesses not suck at how they pitch themselves and tell their story.
Okay, I love that. Do you feel that we're living a different generational type of selling, a new generational selling era? How are you seeing the younger generation change the nature of sales, the art and the science of sales and selling?
I think the biggest things I've seen that seem to be different, and I don't know if it actually truly is different, it just seems to be, at least at like perception level, it seems that it might be different, is I think there seems to be more of a push towards authenticity, which is great. And not that like sales was ever, blanket inauthentic, right? I think there's always been a need to be authentic if you want to be a good seller. I just think that the way sort of corporate mindsets got built up over the years, there seemed to be this overall almost like aura of you need to put on this type of face when you go into the room. And now it's not saying you show up and you don't bring your game face, so to speak, but you can show up and feel and be comfortable a lot more being yourself. So I like this idea of the authenticity angle. And I think the other thing as well is, and this changes with time for any generation, but it's really interesting to see how younger people now are using technology in different ways to incorporate sales, or to using technology and incorporating it into their sales process. Like, I personally have never made a TikTok in my life. I don't even think I have a TikTok account, or maybe I'm actually in their database because at some point I did my Google account connect to them and never fully said delete me from your database. But there are people who are creating TikTok videos and using that to generate sales. So I think it's just almost like there's a lot more avenues now and a lot more ways to get your message out there. And it's just cool to see this almost like a new wave of creativity.
I love that. And let me just pick up on that cue that you were talking about and bring you back to prospecting. In your mind, and with the mentoring and the support that you give to companies and organizations, startups out there, you work with a lot of them. What is to you a successful prospecting cadence? What does it look nowadays? And does it look different for a startup versus a small business or a bigger business? What's your take?
I think it shouldn't look too different. It should be very similar. And to me, the big key is that it should all revolve around personalization or customization. The shift that I want to see and what I try to teach is less focus on quantity, more focus on quality. Stop relying on mass blast campaigns that go out to 1,000 people all at once, and you're just hopeful that 10 of them respond and 3 of them will take a meeting with you. Why do that when you could spend a little bit more time and attention sending out to, and I literally mean this, sending out to 30 or 50 or 100 people at a time and getting 10 responses and 3 to 5 of them will take a meeting with you. Because when you do that, and this is really what I've found to be true with myself, and in cases where we've worked with companies on prospecting, we've found this to be true as well. When you take that care and attention, yes, your overall output is smaller, but you're also going to generate more, you'll generate a better lead ratio based on how many you're reaching out to. And because you took the time and attention in that prospecting cadence to be personalized, the quality of the lead is better, right? Like it's almost like they want to meet with you as opposed to you wanting to meet with them. And that's a much better way to start a relationship where essentially the goal is I have a product that I want you to buy, right? It's much better when they say, oh, we have to meet with them versus, you just get lucky. You throw one generic message out there and you're like, well, fingers crossed. Let's just, because we've sent it to enough people, by nature, some of them will reply and say yes. But those ones who do are more like, it's more a neutral starting point. Whereas if you go smaller quantity, ramp up the personalization, it's like an exciting first meeting.
Is there, in order to achieve that, is there anything more important than that team, that individual in sales, that professional, understanding and knowing their ICP, their ideal client profile better than they probably know themselves? Is there anything more important than that?
I think that's a huge part of it. And I think where some teams tend to still not do enough is they know their ICP sort of at like at a standardized level. Like, oh, we know we sell into IT leaders of mid-sized companies, and we know generally they have this kind of, this problem set, which is like, yeah, you need to know that. But then beyond that, can you start to really understand, okay, where do these people hang out online? What kind of articles or publications do they read to get, inspiration to do their job? What are the things they're saying when they post online, right? Those, like, one of the most valuable things, especially if your market is a market that is active on LinkedIn, is to be able to draft an email based off of what they said in a post or what they commented on someone else's post. And I know that, and that's like hyper personalization, right? Because you really can't duplicate that twice. But if you think about it, if a bunch of people all commented on someone's post and they were more or less kind of endorsing what the person what the original poster said, you actually have a very well personalized campaign. And I've done this before where I'm like, hey, I saw you also commented on this person's post. Not sure if you saw my take on it, but here's what I wrote. And then I'm like, and then from there, it's like really cool that, it seems like we're both thinking about this the same way. And I could send that same exact thing to all 50 people who commented on a specific post. But the fact that I had taken the time to look at what they had done, and I didn't have to say in every email, saw you wrote this specific thing. I can just write, saw you commented, and then here's what I said about it, right? That's like, wow, this person really took the effort to try and get to know me and understand my perspective and point of view. So like, you can give off that effect while still being able to do it at least a small scale.
It's, some of the work that I do, and especially here in Portugal, working with organizations, I find that one of the hardest things to help sellers nowadays to understand is that with prospecting, really all you're starting to do is just kickstart a conversation rather than your starting point being, I'm here to sell you something. Start the conversation. That's the beginning of it all, right?
It is. It's starting a conversation. It is. And yeah, starting a conversation. And I think the other side of it too is if it's starting a conversation as opposed to book a meeting, which is what I think most people go in with, is the goal is to book a meeting. if your goal is to book a meeting, naturally the way you write, the way you talk is going to come off a little bit more like forceful. It's going to be a little bit too assumptive, and a certain level of desperation. It's very easy for a certain level of desperation to be felt or to come out in your messaging, versus if the goal is to start a conversation where you're like, ideally it's going to end up turning into a meeting, but for now, I just want to get them talking. It's amazing how much more laid back you'll be in your messaging, in a good way, like laid back and comfortable in what you're going to say, in what you're going to write. And that even goes to what you're saying in your call to action, right? I mean, I'm sure you've gotten so many emails that are probably sitting in your inbox right now, where the bottom part of it is, what's the best way to get 15 minutes on your calendar? Or are you free on Tuesday at 10 or Thursday at 8 to talk about this? But on your side, and have you ever had those emails before? Or maybe you have some in your inbox now, right?
Oh gosh, yes. And those are
yeah, right. And when you have those, I don't know about you, but when I read that, unless the value prop is just so strikingly good, and I happen to have that exact pain in that exact moment, right? Unless all the stars aligned, when I read that, I'm like, why do you assume that I want to or that I'm ready to meet with you, right? It turns me away. And I always think that when you send an email out, a cold email, you should leave the other person feeling empowered to make their own decision, not take the decision from them or make the decision for them, I should say. And if you say, are you free Tuesday at 10 or Thursday at 8? Like if I say that to you, I have made the decision for you, right? You have not left that interaction feeling empowered. But if I say, would this make sense for SalesShaker? Or does this sound interesting? Or are you interested? I mean, that's my call to action in most of my cold emails. Are you interested? Now it's you getting to tell me what you care about and what you want to do about it. And I have to trust that you're smart enough that if in fact you are interested, you probably would understand that a logical thing to do would be to reply saying, yes, why don't we have a meeting on this?
Yeah, and you've already integrated some kind of value proposition in there, the what's in it for them, the reason why it would be interesting to speak with you, whether it's through in a meeting or whatever way it is. Yep. But I really love that. And Rajiv, you're reading my mind, because the question that I had for you was really some advice with writing cold emails, and I think you've pretty much gone there, and I love what you've said so far. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us and with our audience who is using cold emails? What should they do to stand out next to their potential buyer or investor that encourages them to either reply or, like you said before, to want to talk with them?
I think it's just, it's kind of a, like an oxymoron, but it's like, even though you're trying to get results quickly, you have to have a certain level of patience. And that's where, if you ask that, are you interested, or does this make sense, right? That's a sign on the sender side of some patience, because you're willing to potentially let it go one more email, another back and forth exchange before getting the meeting. But I'll tell you, a lot of times, as I mentioned, if you're interested, that you can suggest to me, sure, why don't we meet on this? Here's my calendar. Like, you'd probably send that as a response. Or, I've had in certain cases where they've said, hey, this looks interesting. Can you send me an example first? Or can you send me an example I can take a look at? And then I'll be like, sure, here's an example. And then 2 days later, if they haven't responded, what did you think? Worth your time? And then they'll say, yeah, sorry, forgot to reply. Let's meet. Right? So did I lose 2 days in the process? Sure. But was I ever going to get the meeting in the first place if I just said, meet with me at this day at this time? Maybe not. Probably not, right? Because it's too presumptive. So just that ability to exercise some patience, be more relaxed and casual in your messaging, and really just personalize it.
Where can we use stories and narratives in this world of prospecting and selling that we live on, and how do we use them specifically to win, whether it be the meeting or the conversation or the discovery meeting or even closing the sale?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different things we could talk about within this. I think there's a couple of things I'll just hit on first at a high level, and that is, I think a lot of people find this idea of storytelling like scary, or they're like, oh, I'm not a storyteller. I don't know how to get started in this. And the reality is your ability to tell a story in a sales environment is all about just being able to be more relatable. And at the same time, in being relatable, can you teach them something? Right? And this is, like one of the best ways a story comes out is in a presentation. And I know there's this huge debate on never use slides versus team no slides versus hashtag team slides, right? I'm fully on team slides. Like, use a presentation. It's a visual guide, so that way it's not just relying on making sure they heard every last thing you said, but there's also some visual marker along the way as well that goes along with what you're saying. But the challenge is so many of these presentations. Like, I think the reason why so many people hate slides is because so many companies use slides, and what they use is a capabilities deck. And the capabilities deck is hey, here's a slide of all of our customer logos. Hey, here's a slide of our executive team, and they have 200 years combined experience. Hey, here's a photo of our headquarters, and we have 10 locations around the world. Here's another slide where we're going to tell you about this customer and this customer, and here's a slide about our product, right? It's just, it's so much about, it's as if you're like, we're great. No, trust me, we're great. No, for real, we're really, really, really great. Don't you want to do business with us, right? And it's something that inspires the other person. And so this is where, especially for companies that really want to become like a mover and shaker, no pun intended, become a mover and shaker in their industry, if they want to ascend their category or create a new category entirely, which is what I think most companies should be thinking about and executing on. If you don't want to be an also-ran, your story should really be one that is so much, it's really not that much about your product. It is a larger story. And if you think about this as a presentation, it is a larger story around the concept of change, where you're able to identify something macro that is taking place in the industry. And then you take the macro and then you parlay that into, here's what that means on a day-to-day, like on an individual level for someone like you. And so when you tell that kind of a story, and then it's like, here's what that means for someone like you, which means something has to be done about it for someone like you. Oh, guess what? We just so happen to have the product that can actually help you do that thing that's going to help you align with this macro shift taking place. Right? That kind of a story. And this is, anytime we build a presentation, this is how it maps out. Like, the first 50 to 70% of that presentation, you have not even talked about your own company yet. You've just built up this case for the way the world is and the way the world is going. And then because of these factors, decisions have to be made. And then after that, you're like, well, if you're going to make a decision, that's where we come in. And since you built it up in a certain way, by the time you talk about your own company and your own offering, it just feels like this inevitable or this like logical next step or this logical conclusion in their mind. And that kind of a way of selling, that mode of storytelling, is where you're actually teaching them something about their own situation that they had never realized before. It's as if it's like, this was under your nose and you never realized it. But now that you do, oh my gosh, like the veil has been lifted, like you've seen behind the curtain at Oz, right? That's the effect that you give off. And by the end, they are saying to themselves, I never thought of it like that before. that's really interesting. We need to keep talking to them. Oh, and by the way, why are we even talking to those 3 other providers? They don't get it the way these people get it, and they get us. And I don't care that they cost a little bit more because they get it.